You know, we have this habit of treating ancient texts like, well, like museum exhibits.
Oh, definitely. Like they're just behind glass.
Right. We put these dusty old metaphors about being salt and light behind velvet ropes, shine a little spotlight on them, and just kind of nod politely as you walk by.
Yeah, we keep them at a very safe distance.
Exactly. But on September 21st, 2025, Pastor Yasushi Nemoto basically took a hammer to that glass.
He really did.
And just a quick note for you listening, if you want to look this up. So in his sermon at the Maui Kahului Union Church, he argued that these metaphors, they aren't just ancient poetry. They are highly demanding operational manuals for, like, the 3-meter radius around you right now.
And that shift in perspective is startling, honestly, because, like I said, we are so used to looking at these texts from a safe theoretical distance.
Yeah, completely theoretical.
But this was part of his broader series called Knowing the Place Called Church. And the title of this specific message, You Are the Shining Salt, it entirely strips away the theoretical.
I mean, it forces you to look at how these ancient concepts operate on a random Tuesday afternoon, you know?
Exactly. It brings it right into the mundane.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because taking a metaphor out of a display case and actually trying to use it well, it changes the stakes entirely.
It absolutely does.
We are looking at how you take these two specific elements, salt and light, and apply them to the microclimate you create wherever you are standing.
Right. But to even grasp that, we really have to start where Pastor Nemoto starts, which is fundamentally changing the rules of what it means to be a quote-unquote good person.
Yes, because before you can figure out how to be salt or light, you have to understand the gap they're supposed to fill in human behavior.
Exactly. He starts by examining the concept of sin, but he bypasses the usual religious framing.
You mean the idea of it just being a checklist of broken rules?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Instead, he frames it as a rejection of design. He points back to the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden.
Okay, setting the stage.
Yeah, so after the deception by Satan, their instinct wasn't just guilt over breaking a rule. Their immediate, overwhelming instinct was to hide.
Wait, hold on. Why is hiding the focal point here?
What do you mean?
Well, if you mess up, getting out of sight seems like a pretty standard, practical human reaction.
Huh.
Why is the physical act of hiding the real issue?
Because hiding is opting out. It is abandoning the relationship and the responsibility of your environment.
Oh, I see.
It's retreating into a completely passive state. What's fascinating here is that Pastor Nemoto zeroes in on this passive state as the core problem.
So it's not just the bad action, it's the lack of any action.
Precisely. The ultimate goal of a life isn't just to not break rules. The goal is willful, active engagement.
But if I'm just living my life, paying my taxes, staying out of trouble, and generally not bothering anybody, society considers me a model citizen.
Sure, by modern standards.
Right, so why does this ancient text demand more than just minding my own business and not causing harm?
That is the exact modern bias he addresses, and he does it with this incredibly relatable analogy about driving a car.
I love this part.
Right. So imagine you were driving exactly 30 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone.
Okay, I'm being perfectly compliant. No one can fault me.
You are compliant. But the police aren't going to pull you over with flashing lights, walk up to your window, and hand you a shiny trophy for doing the bare minimum.
Ooh, definitely not.
You do not get a medal for merely avoiding breaking the law.
So, applying that to our daily routines, just showing up to work, not yelling at the barista or, in a religious context, just reading a book and sitting quietly in a pew.
Yeah.
That's the spiritual equivalent of driving 30 in a 30 zone. It's a neutral existence.
It is entirely neutral. And God isn't looking for people who are merely achieving neutrality.
Which is a huge paradigm shift.
Pastor Nemoto even pointed out to his congregation that morning that just by physically being there, they had made an active choice against neutrality.
Oh, right. The snooze button thing.
Exactly. The path of least resistance was hitting the snooze button. Staying in bed is the 30 miles per hour zone.
Yeah, for sure.
But getting up, turning off the alarm, and choosing to participate in a community that is an active step.
That reframes the entire baseline of morality. Is the difference between just, not actively destroying the world and actively choosing to participate in its preservation.
Which bridges us perfectly into why the text introduces a chemical agent.
Salt.
Right. If neutrality isn't the goal, you need something that mixes into the environment to change it.
See, when I hear the word salt, I immediately just think of French fries.
Most of us do.
Right. To a modern palate, it's a luxury. It's something you shake on at the end of a meal to make things taste a little more interesting. So how would a first-century person have heard that word?
The context couldn't be more different. I mean, we enjoy modern refrigeration. If we want meat to last, we just throw it in the freezer.
Yeah, obviously.
But in the ancient Near East, salt was the primary chemical technology keeping society alive.
Wow. Technology.
Yeah, meat and food would spoil rapidly in the desert heat. Salt wasn't a flavor enhancer, it was a literal lifesaver. It was an industrial preservative that prevented rot.
So when the text says, "You are the salt of the earth," it is not telling you to go out and make life more spicy or entertaining for the people around you.
Not at all.
It is assigning you a role as a preservative.
Think about what a preservative actually does at a molecular level. It stops decay.
Okay, yeah.
Pastor Nemoto asks his listeners to consider their specific environments. If you weren't in your workplace or your family dynamic, how would the atmosphere shift?
That's a heavy question.
It is. By actively living out your values, your presence acts as a chemical barrier against the decay of negativity, selfishness, or corruption in that specific room.
And what's interesting about salt chemically is that you don't need a mountain of it to change a dish.
Right, just a little.
A tiny pinch alters the entire composition. You don't have to be the whole meal, you just have to be the pinch.
That's a great way to put it. And there is also a deeper historical layer to this mineral. In the ancient world, there was a widespread concept called the salt covenant.
A salt covenant. I've heard of blood covenants or exchanging rings to seal an agreement, but how does salt seal a deal?
Consider it from a chemical perspective in that era. In a world where food rots, metal rusts, and wood decays, salt is one of the only substances an ancient person interacted with that remained completely unchanged by time or heat.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that.
Yeah, sharing it meant your word was as incorruptible as the mineral itself. It symbolized ultimate permanence and consistency.
That is a massive challenge for us today. I mean, we are governed by the outrage cycle.
Oh, completely.
We react to whatever fake news is trending on our feeds. Our emotions swing wildly from day to day based on the cultural mood. So to be salt means achieving a level of consistency where people know exactly who you are, regardless of the current social weather.
Exactly. It requires an immense internal grounding. And Pastor Nemoto brings in a very stark geographical warning about what happens when that grounding is lost.
The Dead Sea salt.
Right, referencing the salt from the Dead Sea.
But wait, if salt is chemically incorruptible, how does it fail? The metaphor breaks down a bit if salt can't actually change.
Well, it is not that the sodium chloride itself changes. The salt gathered near the Dead Sea was heavily mixed with other minerals like gypsum.
Okay.
If that raw mixture was exposed to rain or intense moisture, the actual sodium chloride could dissolve and leach out.
Oh, leaving behind the other stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What you were left with was a white powder that looked exactly like salt, but had absolutely no preservative power. It was worthless dirt. And the biblical text notes that people would just throw it out on the road to be trampled.
What a visual. A person can look the part. They can maintain the outer appearance of someone who is a positive stabilizing force.
Right.
But if they haven't maintained their internal substance, their actual connection to their values, the sodium chloride has leached out. They are just white powder.
They lose their impact. Maintaining your internal state, whether that is through daily mindfulness, prayer, or connecting to whatever grounds your core values, is the only thing that gives you that preservative power.
That makes so much sense.
If you neglect the source, you lose your saltiness. You become spiritually ineffective.
So if the goal is active engagement, salt is the invisible side of that equation. It mixes in. It works chemically below the surface to hold back decay.
Yes, that's exactly it.
But the second part of Pastor Nemoto's sermon shifts to something that operates entirely differently. Light. You are the light of the world.
And just as we misunderstand salt because of our modern conveniences, we drastically underestimate the concept of light because of the flip of a switch.
Oh yeah, we are flowed with artificial light to the point that we don't even think about it.
We really don't.
I mean, I can literally talk to my wall and tell it to turn on the living room lights at 50% brightness. We have zero concept of what light actually meant to these people.
In Jesus' time, lighting a room at night required an oil lamp.
And oil wasn't cheap, right?
Not at all. Oil was an agricultural product that took immense labor to produce. It was a precious, expensive commodity.
Wow.
So burning a lamp wasn't just a matter of convenience so you could read a little later. It was a serious economic decision. Every minute that flame burned, it was costing you resources.
Wait, if it was that expensive, why burn it at all? I mean, why not just go to sleep when the sun goes down and save the money?
Because we forget how absolute the darkness was in the ancient world.
Right. No streetlights.
No streetlights, no ambient glow from a city on the horizon. The darkness was total, and it was dangerous. True darkness causes sensory deprivation and fear.
That makes sense.
Burning that expensive oil created a visible perimeter of safety and comfort in an otherwise terrifying environment. It was a lifeline.
He brings this into the modern day in a way that really clicks for me.
The storm analogy.
Yeah. He compares it to a sudden power outage. When a massive storm knocks the grid out and you are suddenly plunged into pitch black, there is this moment of real visceral anxiety.
Absolutely.
But then someone in the room pulls out their smartphone and turns on the flashlight. The relief is instant.
He actually uses the specific image of his granddaughters. He talks about them taking a smartphone light under a blanket to play.
Oh, that's sweet.
Right. In the midst of a completely dark room, that small light provides a sanctuary. It's not illuminating the whole house, but it creates a safe space right where they're sitting.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because the explicit instruction that comes with this light is about where you are supposed to put it.
The measuring basket.
Yes.
Yeah.
The text says a lamp shouldn't be hidden under a measuring basket, which honestly seems like such bizarre, obvious advice.
It does sound a bit silly at first.
Like, why would anyone go through the economic burden of lighting an expensive lamp and then cover it with a wooden bucket?
It represents a specific type of spiritual hoarding. Pastor Nemoto points out the absurdity of a community of believers only shining their light inside the walls of their church.
Oh, wow.
If you only share your resources and your light with other people who already have light, you are essentially just sitting in a bowl staring at each other's lamps. The darkness outside remains completely unaffected.
It's like owning a high-powered, incredibly expensive rescue flare, but deciding you are only ever going to set it off inside your own living room with your curtains tightly drawn.
Exactly. It defeats the entire purpose of the tool.
That's such a good way to frame it.
The light has to be taken out into the darkness to have any value. It involves a willingness to be visible.
I see.
When you synthesize these two concepts, you get a complete picture of active engagement. You need the invisible, consistent integrity of salt to prevent decay from within.
Right.
But you also need the visible, comforting presence of light to provide guidance and safety from without.
Okay, I am tracking with the mechanics of this, but honestly, it sounds exhausting.
It's a lot.
If my daily mandate is to hold back the corruption of society as an incorruptible preservative and simultaneously be a glowing beacon of safety in a terrifying dark world, I kind of get why Adam and Eve hid in the bushes.
That is a lot of pressure.
That is a monumental amount of pressure for a Tuesday afternoon.
And that is exactly where Pastor Nemoto makes his most crucial pivot. He doesn't leave his listeners with the weight of the world on their shoulders.
Thank goodness.
He immediately shrinks the scale down to introduce his core thesis, the radius of 3 meters.
The 3-meter radius.
Yeah.
That completely shifts the pressure. It takes this massive historical burden and just drops it onto the bus stop bench right next to you.
He points out that God does not demand you to achieve massive historical feats. We tend to idolize world-changing figures who leave an impact on millions.
Right, the influencers and the heroes.
But Pastor Nemoto uses a brilliant bit of humor here to break that tension. He says, if God wanted us to be monumental, unshakable pillars of society, he would have said, you are the concrete of the earth. You are the steel of the world.
The concrete of the earth. I can just imagine someone waking up and trying to be the spiritual concrete of their office building.
It's too heavy. It's rigid.
Yeah, but he didn't pick industrial building materials. He picked things you would find on the table in a peasant's kitchen.
Because the application is meant to be deeply ordinary. The 3-meter radius is tiny.
Very manageable.
It is noticing the struggling senior at the dark bus stop and pulling out your phone to give them light to see their belongings.
Oh, that's practical.
It is offering a grounding, kind word when a conversation at work starts drifting into toxic gossip. It is the person sitting in the passenger seat of your car.
So what does this all mean? For you listening, maybe you're doing the dishes right now or stuck in traffic and feeling entirely unremarkable. How does redefining your impact to a 3-meter radius actually change the way you move through your day?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it dismantles the toxic modern idea of scale.
Okay, say more about that.
We live in a culture that tells us if our impact doesn't scale to thousands of followers, or if we aren't quote-unquote changing the world, our actions don't matter.
That is so true. We're obsessed with going viral.
Right. But Pastor Emoto is arguing that profound value is found in the microclimate you create locally. You don't need a massive platform. You just need to be fully present in the 3 meters around you.
And there's a safety net underneath all of this, isn't there? He grounds this entire call to action in a promise from the book of Isaiah, chapter 43, verse 4.
Yes, a very important verse.
The text says, "You are precious and honored in my sight, and I love you." Why is that specific reassurance so critical to this 3-meter concept?
Because if you are trying to be salt and light merely to earn your value, you will burn out immediately.
Just exhaust yourself trying to fix everyone.
Exactly. You will constantly feel like you aren't doing enough. He uses the metaphor of a youthful crush.
Oh, I loved this part.
Think back to when you were young and had a massive crush on someone. You just longed to be near them. You wanted to see them regardless of what they were doing.
Yeah, that intense focus.
He says that is the intensity with which God desires to be with you.
Even if your light is flickering or, your salt feels a little watered down by the stress of the week.
Even then, you don't have to perform monumental tasks to earn your way into being valuable. You are loved exactly as you are, flaws and all.
That's huge.
Understanding that entirely removes the paralysis of perfectionism.
That is the unlock right there. If you think you have to be flawless to make an impact, you'll just stay in the bushes.
You'll keep hiding.
Right. But if your fundamental value is already secure, you are free to just bring your authentic, imperfect self into that 3-meter radius and get to work.
Absolutely.
Let's retrace the steps we've taken on this deep dive today. We started by realizing that coasting at the speed limit of morality, just passively avoiding trouble, is not the goal. The text demands active engagement.
And that engagement takes 2 distinct forms. The invisible chemistry of salt, requiring us to maintain our internal integrity to preserve the spaces we inhabit.
Right. Preservative.
And the visible economics of light, demanding that we spend our resources to create safety and comfort for others, rather than hiding our light under a basket to hoard it.
And we can do all of this without buckling under the pressure, because the mandate is strictly limited to the 3 meters around us.
Exactly.
We aren't the concrete of the earth. We are just everyday elements operating from a place of already being inherently valued. We've taken these metaphors completely out of the museum case.
They are tools on the workbench now, ready to be used in the grit of your daily routine.
Which leaves us with a completely different way to look at our surroundings. We've talked a lot about how your 3-meter radius impacts others. But here is something to mull over today as you move from space to space.
Well, this is a good question.
Whose 3-meter radius are you currently standing in? And is there salt and light preserving your integrity, or leaching it away like a rainstorm over the Dead Sea?
Something to really think about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, check your radius, and we will catch you on the next one.